record at the start, because that was a big blunder that I made last week. So after a couple of training ones, we're going to go into some nutrition stuff, and we're going to talk about gut health. So thank you for everyone that voted on this. For people that voted the periodization, which was second, I will do that next week. So we're going to be looking into this. Again, the key thing with regards to gut health, this is like, it's one of those topics where it's deeper than you can ever imagine. Right, we certainly can't tackle the entirety of the gut in one lecture, and I understand that there's going to be people with different experiences here. So feel free to jump in if you've got some experience in this stuff, or if you've got particular client issues you think are relevant at any point. Like, let's make this discussion rather than just a lecture thing. But we've got a lot to go through, so let's crack on with it. So the key thing here with this, and this is like, when we see people like Tim Spector and Dara CEO making bogus claims, and there are some good stuff about what Tim Spector says, but 90% of it is fueled by financial incentive and stupidity. But the key thing to remember is we still know very little definitive info about the gut. We're still learning about this. It's amazing that we're sending things to Mars and trying to find things at the bottom of the ocean, and we don't even properly know the bacteria within our stomach. So not that you should take this with a pinch of salt, because there is a very emerging research to look into this, but a key thing to remember is that this will not make calories irrefutable. This does not change what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's just things to bear in mind and consider alongside what you already do. Don't go so far down the wormhole that you get lost. But as I said, we do know it has an impact on both fat loss and diet adherence by the links that the gut has to things like the thyroid, from the links the gut has to things like the brain, etc., etc., etc. So it's from a making fat loss efficient perspective, making your metabolism efficient perspective, making your diet easy to stick to perspective. It's worth knowing a little bit about this. Just to sort of go into this, I'm going to go on briefly onto the whiteboard. This is something that the guys that are on SMU will know about. But when we look at, let me just move my head out of the way so it finds the whiteboard. The key thing when it comes to fat loss, I'm assuming, like, put a 1 in the chat if most of you, what you teach is fat loss. Is most of your clients got a fat loss goal? So Mark, cool. So it's going to be pretty much everybody, right? So I just want to caveat this a little bit with, okay, so what impact does this have on fat loss? Because I don't deal with people with autoimmune conditions or leaky gut or gut issues. So why is it relevant? Well, let's say here we've got our total daily energy expenditure. So our TDEE, right? Quiz time, pop quiz. What is this biggest section? That's about 60 to 70%.
BMI.
BMR, yeah. BMI is body mass index. Yeah. But BMR, I know where you were going with it. Right, so you got your BMR. And then above that, what else have we got? Someone that's not Gavin.
Your NEAT. Oh, sorry.
No, I just know you know the answers, mate. So we've got NEAT. We've got thermic effect of food I saw in there. And then what else we got? Exercise. Now, when we look at this, most coaches only focus on these factors. And I'd also agree that most coaches don't really understand what goes into these factors either, because NEAT isn't steps, it's subconscious movement. Thermic effect of food, despite having more protein, will go down because you're eating less food. But when people look at BMR, they think of coma calories, right? They think this is what I need to, like, stay in bed all day, and then they just move on. Well, this is 60 to 70% of our metabolic rate. So isn't it worth paying some attention here about what's actually going on under the hood to make this fire on all cylinders? Because if we can get this up, we can be in a position where we can eat more food and still be in a deficit, because maintenance calories has gone higher. So if we look at things like the liver, it's about 15 to 20% of our BMR. Our gut will have an impact on thyroid, which both have an impact on here, right? And we could go into lots of things here, but I just want to say, like, if we can get these things firing on all cylinders, fat loss, hypertrophy, nutrient absorption, like, it's going to be much more efficient. Also, if our gut's chronically inflamed, we're going to be in a chronically stressed state, right? If we're chronically in a state where we're burning glucose as fuel because we're in a chronically fight or flight state, but we're in a caloric deficit, in a caloric deficit, we will lose weight. But what percentage of that weight is going to be, let Sam in, is going to be muscle, and what percentage of that's going to be body fat? We all talk about eat less, move more, but we don't actually really break down on what do we need to do. Body fat. We all talk about eat less, move more, but got me on repeat. Sam? Body fat. That's weird. That's weird. Hearing me back. But does that make sense? Put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense to people. This is why it's important to learn a little bit about what goes under the hood. The coaches that know what goes under the hood, and are not just the ones on Instagram preaching eat less, move more, are the ones that can help more people. Right? So coming back to this. So again, this is a big, broad topic. For the people that are in SMU, you'll know this, but within SMU, we break down in much more depth how the digestive systems work so you can troubleshoot at each individual area. You understand how it works from the mouth all the way down to your butthole. But today, I'm going to teach you a framework to get you started and some of the things to think about. And then from there, you can choose to go and then study the bits that interest you yourself, right? Or come and join us and we can go through it together. So the first thing before we actually start looking at the gut is understanding how this overall system pieces together. Kane and your goddamn green screen, man. What is behind you? Is it the solar system? Right? So understand that everything in our body into place, right? It's like when we look at anatomy, we go, right, bicep, origin, insertion, pulls and does this. But then we start to look at fascia, we realize that muscles are links. Same thing here. We can look at the gut as this self-inflicted thing that's on its own, or we can understand that this has an impact with the brain. This has an impact with the cells, has an impact with the adrenals. This has an impact with the liver, which has an impact with the thyroid. So we need to start thinking holistically here. And before we get into like probiotics and enzymes and all this sort of stuff, understand, you just sent that to me, Kane, but I'll read that for everybody. Luke once said fats can turn into fascia. I don't know about that. I can have a look at that. I have no idea. But when we look at this in terms of an overall system, it's like, well, what can we do to make this system work better? What are the big sort of rocks or the biggest dominoes we can push? So when we look at this, and again, I go into more detail in another lecture about this, but if we look at cells as our first thing, so our cells create everything. It's the smallest thing that we can influence in the body. So we've got atoms, and then we've got cells. Cells, a bunch of cells will create an organ. So your brain is made up of cells. Your large intestine is made up of cells. Your adrenals are made up of cells. Your thyroids are made up of cells. Right? A bunch of organs will create organ systems. So your digestive system is a bunch of organs in a system that now become cells. So before we start looking at some of the really, really complicated shit, it's important to understand, right, what our cells, what impact our cells have on all of this. And how can we have healthy cells? Because if we have healthy cells, we have healthy organs, including our digestive system. So this could be improving someone's aerobic base, bringing down inflammation so things can get into the cells well, right? Which could be stress management, could be recovery, could be food choices, could be nutrient deficiencies, right? Things like B vitamins are really important for the Krebs cycle to run. Hydration's super important, right? So that's going to be one of the big things here, is understanding this whole impact here. I'm going to go into a few of these things. But again, I'm going to quickly come back to the whiteboard and understand that the impact that yo-yo dieting has had. And like, whether you're going to go, well, is this actually relevant? If I just put my clients on a deficit, does it really matter? Well, it depends on your client that you've got in front of you and what their current history is. So if we look at somebody, let's say they're starting their calories here and they've yo-yo dieted in the past, right? So their calories will drop. What else will drop? Muscle mass will drop. Thyroid will drop. Testosterone will drop. So in this position down at the bottom here, right? Let's say they've had this bad diet before you or a bad coach before you, and they're reversed. They've gained tons of calories have gone like this. Body fat has also gone up dramatically. But thyroid and testosterone will gradually increase. It's a little bit lagged behind. So now we're in this situation where someone can gain so much more fat if they don't reverse well than he did in the first place. because their muscle mass is lower, their metabolic rate is lower. And if we keep doing this, if our thyroid doesn't have a chance to catch up, our thyroid's going to be in this thing where it's really struggling, falling behind, which is then going to have an impact on all our cells that are powering our gut. Right? So, that's another lecture in itself. But the key thing I want you guys to get from that is that if you've got someone that's had a chronic history of yo-yo dieting, you might want to consider some of this holistic health stuff rather than just sticking them on a deficit, because they might not be able to handle it. Or they might need to rebuild thyroid health by ramping calories a little bit higher for a period of time, or building some lean tissue and just getting them in a good space to diet, right? Hopefully, does that make sense? Give me like a thumbs up in the screen if that makes sense. I don't want to overdo the one thing. Cool. So as we said, smallest thing we've got is the atom. Bunch of atoms make molecules. Bunch of molecules make macromolecules. Bunch of macromolecules make cells. This is the smallest thing we can influence. We can't change this. We can't control our atoms, but we can directly influence our cells. And our cells will have an impact on everything from the gut. So the first thing to look at and understand before we actually start getting into what we can do directly for the gut is how can we have someone get healthy from a cellular perspective? Hydration, things like B vitamins, nutrient deficiencies, stress management, so we haven't got a lot of oxidative stress, bring down inflammation, aerobic base, stuff like this. So then coming back to this, when we look to our thyroid, what does the thyroid do? Can anyone either tell me, either unmute or put it in the chat? What's the job of the thyroid?
Is it connected to your metabolism? No.
Say that again, sorry?
Is it connected to your metabolism?
Yeah. Yeah, so it basically regulates our metabolism. Now, the word metabolism, people have got it linked with fat loss. And while that's part of this, but our metabolism is how basically upregulated our cells are, right? So if someone's got too much thyroid, every cell in the body will be upregulated. And if someone's got too little thyroid, every cell in the body is going to be downregulated. So it's not just a fat loss thing. This is why people who have low thyroid are often very cold, particularly at the extremities, right? So if we look at this, is that going back to this, the thyroid, if we've got a dysfunctioning thyroid, that's going to cycle back and influence every cell and how much they are working. So we've also got to think of, if we can get thyroid in a good place, that's going to upregulate the things that are going to help the gut work. Right? And this is much simpler, even though it sounds complicated. This is much simpler than going, what strain of probiotic do I need to do? Yes, it's easy just to find out a probiotic strain and go, take this. But if you're not addressing the root cause of that problem, it's just a really, really expensive shit that these people are going to have. So part of the conversion from T4, the inactive part of thyroid, to T3 will happen in the gut. So a fully functioning thyroid, as Gavin said, upregulates the metabolism. So that is every cell in the body, including the cells that are responsible for pushing things through the digestive system, right? For stopping things getting through the digestive lining. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing. Poor gut health can impact thyroid health because now we don't have that conversion from T4 to T3, but improving thyroid health could improve gut health. So how can we look with our diets to help someone upregulate thyroid? Well, we could start looking at things like iodine and making sure that they're not struggling with minerals. We can make sure they've got enough electrolytes. But also we want to make sure for people like this, if thyroid is a bit of an issue and people are feeling a bit sluggish in energy or a bit cold hands and feet and things like this, and these signs that thyroid isn't where it should be, we don't want to go particularly low carb with these people because carbs have a direct response to upregulate thyroid. This is the reason why we don't refeed with cheese. We refeed with carbohydrates. And then that brings us on to stress. So does anyone want to have a guess? And again, Gavin's on the ball today, so I want to give someone else a chance. Does anyone have an idea of how stress can impact the gut?
Produces more cortisol, which puts more stress on the body and then has an effect on gut and digestion.
Yes, but why? Why does stress impact the body that way?
Pass.
So so I came in with a machine gun, maybe not me because I'm like, you know me and I'm a little bit more friendly, you know, I wouldn't pull the trigger. But if a scary man with a machine gun walked into your gym and started shooting, what would happen? What would your nervous system do?
Fight or flight.
Fight or flight, right? So run or dick kick is what I normally say, right? So we can get, if we're going in a position where we're going to run and dick kick, what is not important in that moment, right? So we've got our sympathetic response, which are fight, flight, freeze, or dick kick, which is going to prioritize things like blood flow to the extremities, right? To fight, right? And run, right? It's going to shift blood away from the digestive system. It's going to shut down things like the immune system, reproductive system, because that's not important right now. We can worry about making babies and having sex when this motherfucker's either dead or we're out the door, right? So understanding that we're not going to solve anything with the guts if we've got a client that's chronically in this sympathetic state. So that basic stuff of managing training volume so they're not overtraining, managing sleep, managing recovery, look at stress management, plugging nutrient deficiencies, these sort of things, so we can bring down what we call our allostatic load, which is essentially our stress cup. So for people who are new to Supercharge, imagine my coffee mug is like the amount of stress I can handle. If I pour some of my Coke into this, right, I've still got quite a lot of cup left, which means I can handle bigger deficits. I can handle more training volume. But if I fill this up to the point where it's starting to overflow, I have two options. I either pour some of the stuff out. This is why I can maybe reduce training volume. This is why I often reduce training volume at the end of a diet when people are a bit fucked. Or I could get a bigger cup. That's meditation, that's journaling, that's changing our perception of that stress, right? So what can we do to do this first? These are the precursor things before you get into the nerd shits about gut health. Because when we get into this parasympathetic state, rest and digest, the clues in the name. Fat is lost at rest, muscle is built at rest, digestion happens at rest. And this is linked by something called the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is what links the gut to the brain. This is going to come really important later because this is the reason why things like 95% of our serotonin is made in the gut. Serotonin makes us happy. Also, a lot of our dopamine is made in the gut. Dopamine is really, really important for things like willpower, motivation, and things like that. So if the gut's in a bad place, if your client's just always snacking on cookies, right? We've seen this before when people are going, oh, this client won't adhere to my program and I'm going to fire them because they're rubbish. Maybe they are rubbish, but maybe we can start looking at some of their digestive stuff. Maybe that's your sign to go, well, let's have a look at this. Is there gas? Is there bloating? Right? Is the diet heavily processed? Because maybe if we sort some of this stuff out and take a break from the calorie counting and the pressure, we might find it's easier to come back to later down the line. Right? And our stress response, as well as our gut, help regulate our immune system. Obviously, clearly, I must be super stressed and clearly have a bad gut right now because I've got a bunch of the flu. So we can start to see how this has a big knock-on effect. So managing our stressors, right? As I said, 95% of our serotonin and dopamine, which keeps us motivated. So looking at the gut can be really important to help people like actually stick to a diet and not make this a really, really horrible thing for them. Now, this doesn't mean you have to change their life around and put everyone on an elimination diet, but it means that just like looking at things like rather than just how many Pop-Tarts can I fit into my macros and start looking at a health first approach and then maybe trying to add in a little bit of what people want is the way forward. There's a post I've got ready to go on Instagram very soon, which is like, I think more of your clients eat too much processed food than need to learn how to fit low carb carbonara and Domino's into their plan. Right? And then if we break that down on some of the two things, our stress response is done through what we call this HPA axis. So hypothalamus in our brain will talk to our pituitary. Our pituitary will talk to our adrenals, which will then release our adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol. Right? That's how stress works. And it's a feedback loop. When that person shooting a gun in Craig's gym goes away, there's a message back to the brain. The hypothalamus goes, oh, we can shut this down now. And it tells the adrenals, calm the fuck down, or it should do. Right? And then we've got this other one called the HPT axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis. So if we can notice here, this increase of stress here can inhibit thyroid stimulating hormone. We can also find this increase in cortisol can inhibit this conversion from inactive form of thyroid to active form of thyroid. Overproduction of stress can also lead to an overconversion in reverse T3. So we can now start to see how this will affect the gut. So the basics you put in place is just going to be stress management, getting people as healthy as possible before we start to dig any deeper. Because often if you find like, put a one in the chat if you ever had done a food intolerance test with a client. Has anyone ever done one? No one? Oh, I was really hoping there'd be someone there. But generally, okay, you have one can be so okay, cool. How many foods, James, was that person intolerant to? Was it like a fucking dissertation?
It wasn't too bad. It was more around gluten and stuff like that. So it was like eggs, barley, wheat, and just it's like spread across a lot. But I've never seen anything like it before. This report they give me is fucking huge. Everything I tested for is in like foods, and it was like massive. It was really in detail as well. Really good, really good.
So food intolerance tests, they're not useless, but they come with a massive caveat, and that is that because of this response of stress and the digestive system, if I'm in a super stressed, under-recovered state and I go in to do a food intolerance test, it's going to tell me that I can't eat any food ever again. It's going to come with this massive list of foods. Now, doesn't mean you don't start taking some of those foods out. If the client's got really bad symptoms and they really want an answer, you can start to do a bit of elimination diet here, because the thing they actually are intolerant to will be in there somewhere if there is anything. But they have to give up the whole of their life for that problem. Whereas if we calm them down and manage the stress response first, and then if there were still issues, send them for a food intolerance test, we might get a smaller list of more accurate things, right? Rather than finding a needle in a haystack, it's like finding one needle on a clean desk, right? So this is the reason why these things need to be worked on first. The next thing is the liver. We established earlier on that the liver is responsible for about 15 to 20% of our metabolism, so super important. But our liver helps manage things like our glucose response from adrenaline and noradrenaline. So that initial fight or flight response is mobilization of glucose from the liver. So this has an impact on that. But also it's the thing that manages toxins. This is the reason why liver is often talked about when we go on a piss, right? People who overdrink, like are alcoholics, they have fatty liver disease, things like this, because their liver can't handle the toxins they're taking in. Now, if we start to think about this now, if we now are not getting these, if the liver's not in a good place and it's not getting rid of these toxins how it should, now our liver's pretty resilient. We don't have to go on these crazy detoxes. But if the liver's not doing what it should be doing, this is now going to potentially have things lying around the digestive system that we don't deal with very well. The longer these things lie around, especially in the digestive system or in the bloodstream, we're going to see issues of knock-on effects of cortisol, insulin, things like this. So when we look at this, and a randomized control trial looking at people with autoimmune and liver diseases found that leaky guts were found in about 30 to 86% of cases. Now, here's the thing. Did the liver disease or the autoimmune condition cause the leaky gut? Or did the leaky gut cause the autoimmune condition? Who knows? Very, very hard to tell. But the key thing to think about here is that if we can help the liver do its job well, and this doesn't mean you have to go take everyone through a detox plan, because that's fucking stupid. But if we can just support the liver on what it needs to do, then we're going to probably find there's less gut issues that come from this. And again, this is just bumping up that BMR. So there is the best way to look at this when it comes to toxins. Toxins are a really tricky one because, no worries, Tom. Like toxins are a really tricky one because the toxins now are in fucking everything. And if you wanted to try and have this perfect healthy liver, you wouldn't ever drink any water. You'd be scared to leave your room. And even in your room, you might have fucking mold. So who the fuck cares? I wouldn't drink from plastic or tin. Terrible. But there's a great, put a one in the chat if you know who Propane Fitness are, and Yusef from Propane Fitness. He did a phenomenal video breaking down like how much of this is really important. How much do toxins really matter? And the answer is, yeah, more than you think. Now, while a lot of the things that allow some of these toxins to come in say they are safe, it's in a certain amount. And these things are now getting increasing over and over, over time massively. The stuff that's in our water, the stuff that's in our vegetables, stuff that's sprayed in our foods. So if we start to look at things, if a client's experiencing more and more of these digestive issues and more issues with stuff, this is something to consider. What are the heavy metals they have? Do they have mercury fillings? We can't really get rid of them very well, but that could be a a sign that we maybe not be able to handle other stress. Our stress cup might be half full from all the mercury fillings we had because someone is 45 and had a bunch of them, right? If someone's having tons of skin products, tons of tanning products, stuff on them, we might start to look at some natural alternatives to these things just to try and bring down this toxic load, right? We might start looking like filtering our waters. Again, these are last resort stuff. One of your clients are worried about estrogen being the water ban. I think they're overthinking it, but they're not wrong. You know, it's an alternative of fake tan. That's not really. It's just a case of weighing things up. I had Shannon doing a 4-part series on the contraceptive pill and female health, and she spoke about this, some like lip fillers and stuff like this. And it's just weighing up what you're willing to do, what risks you're willing to take. So start looking at these things, and like, again, this is not the first thing because it could get monstrous, but this is, again, just a thing to think about. So things like fluoride in our toothpaste, going for natural toothpastes, lead in various things, mercury in certain fish. I don't think anyone got mercury poisoning from eating too much tin tuna. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but certainly people with fillings, there is certainly an issue here. And I know a lot of people with real issues with mercury. But there's a bunch of stuff. Looking at mold in the house, if you can get rid of that stuff, you'll probably find things a little bit easier. And if you can't, I'm not going to tell someone in the middle of Hong Kong or London or Los Angeles to move, but understand that you may have to go harder on some of the other stress management things because these things you can't avoid. In Hong Kong, I went to a functional medicine doctor and said, he's an Australian dude. He went, I've never seen testosterone readings worse than when I moved to Hong Kong. Now, I couldn't move, but it was just something I needed to be aware of. So how can we start to minimize these things where possible? So now we've understood some of the overarching things. Put a 1 in the chat if that sort of makes sense. I know I've brushed past this. I know it's been super quick, right? But this is a 1-part lecture. But put a 1 in the chat if that sort of makes sense. Enough to kind of do your own research and go from there. Cool. So next thing is understanding leaky gut. Now, all of these things we've spoken before could increase our risk of leaky gut. But what is leaky gut? So these are a couple of slides that an analogy I use directly in our SMU call about this. But if we look at, I've missed a slide. That's annoying. So if we look at our digest, like our large intestine and food going through it, there's this thing called villi, which helps like brush food, take some of the good stuff, allows that to go through the bacterial lining and into the bloodstream to be utilized for wherever it is. And then there are other stuff that we don't want in our food that won't get through that lining. So the holes are too big. And imagine this, thinking like this is you got a bouncer. So there's this sticky substance over your digestive wall called SIGA. So imagine this like the bouncer. And then he will see things he doesn't want to go into, like the nightclub here, and he will send these antibodies, which if I had the original slide, these would be sort of blocking these parasites from getting past this door. But let's say we've got someone that's chronically stressed for all the reasons we maybe have spoke about before. Could be antibiotic use, could be a bunch of other things. It's like this SIGA is like, fuck this, I hate this job, I'm underpaid, I'm overworked, I'm just falling asleep on the job. So all of a sudden he leaves this door open for all these parasites to get in. And now these antibiotics, who are supposed to be told which direct thing they're going to deal with. So normally this guy will deal with this thing, this guy will deal with this worm thing, this guy will deal with this caterpillary thing, this guy will deal with this sort of like bomb looking thing. Now has no direction. And now we're finding when these things get in, our body's now responding with these antibodies attacking things that our own body, because it doesn't know what's good and what's bad anymore, because this SIGA is just letting things in left, right, and center. So when we see this, these parasites are now getting into the bloodstreams, what we call leaky gut, which then, of course, creates an immune response. So our body goes, shit, we've got these things in the bloodstream. Let's increase cortisol, right, to get rid of these things, create this stress response, right, which then in turn will mobilize glucose, and which in turn will increase insulin, right? So now we're going to start seeing these roller coaster of blood sugar emotions that isn't necessarily from food, but it could be because of the stress we're causing in the gut. And over time, this is going to have a knock-on effect, because as cortisol goes up, testosterone goes down. These two things work in an inverse relationship. Right? So if this is a chronic thing, we're going to see bigger issues here. What's Kane saying? Oh my God. So if we start looking at things that increase the risk of leaky gut, we're going to be looking at things like systemic inflammation. This is different from acute inflammation. This isn't like I'm training, I've got a bit of DOMS, or I've cut my arm, I've got a scab. This is chronic inflammation caused by chronic stress on the system. So this could be overtraining, this could be diet-related nutrient deficiencies, this could be gut issues, it could be ignored conditions, etc., etc. Aging, our guts over time are going to become less efficient as we get older. Dysbiosis, or imbalance of good and bad bacteria. Gastrointestinal conditions, things like IBS, GERD, autoimmune conditions. So understanding how the digestive system works, the mouth, the butthole, and understanding the symptoms can help you identify some of these things. And not to treat them, but maybe plug some things which help manage them and refer out if it's above your scope. Diets and lifestyle. So we can start looking at like our omega-3s to 6 ratios, right? If we're chronically inflamed, this is not going to help this. Processed foods that could cause potential issues, stress, sleep, all the basic stuff. We also look at medications can affect the gut. Antibiotics being the obvious one. Hormone replacement therapy and contraception could also have an impact on this. It's another lecture for another day, but when Shannon came in and did her lecture in SMU about the Conceptum pill and the impact it has, I already knew a lot, but I was blown away by how much of an impact this can have on all sorts of things. So metabolic syndrome, we've spoken about metabolic syndrome before in previous lectures, or disease states, and then GI conditions like parasites, H. pylori, candida, things like this can also impact higher risk of leaky gut. So what can we do about it? Put a 1 in the chat if you're following me so far. And put a 2 in the chat if you've heard of the 5R program or a variation of it. So 1 if you're following, 2 if you've heard of this before. Mark's following, James is following, Ashling's following. Cool. I think Gab has moved away from his chair. Sam is following. Good, good. Cool. Has anyone heard of this program before? So the 5R program is essentially a way to look at digestive stuff. Yeah, no worries. It will go on the site. It's on the Facebook group as well. So essentially, George, manage stress, manage toxic load, manage recovery before getting into the nerd shit. That's essentially the nutshell of it. So the 5R program is essentially a way to look at digestive issues when you know there's a digestive issue that we need to deal with, to actually start to identify what the biggest problem is, and then to create an environment that can heal the gut. So it's going to look like this: remove, replace, repair, repopulate, rebalance, or reintroduce. Now, there are a million different people that use various different R's in the 5R program, right? You'll probably do your research and you'll feel people with different names. These are just the ones that I've researched and my mentors have taught me, but we're going to go through each of these. So to start off with is going to be remove. So with remove, it's like, what are the common inflammatories? You spoke about food intolerance tests earlier on. What is the common inflammatories that people are going to affect more people's digestive system? Or what's affecting your client's digestive system? So if you've got a client that has digestive issues, bloating, gas, maybe acne, brain fog, the list can go on, and you've come to the conclusion you want to try digestion as maybe a means to solve this issue. You can either go through a food reaction log. So take your client to take a little notepad and write down how they feel, or maybe in your trackers. How would you feel 30 to 90 minutes after this meal? And you'll start to, over time, understand which meals they go, man, I feel fucking amazing. And others one, oh, I'm really bloaty or farty. Because most of your clients, it's become normal now to feel like shit, that they don't realize it until they become aware of it. So awareness is the first step. Now, let me get rid of these Google things. So if you don't know, or if they're just having chronic symptoms, here's a good place to start. So the key thing about remove, it's hard to put out a fire while someone is throwing petrol on it. So if we stop putting in probiotics or enzymes or doing these gut protocols to sort of repair the gut, if I'm chronically giving it the food that's fucking the gut up in the first place, we need to remove the thing that's causing the issue. It's like if I wanted George to de-stress, it's really, I could give him all the meditation and the journaling and the breath work and the ice baths in the world. But if I'm sitting there next to him going, hey, George, 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 he's not going to calm down. Eventually, he's going to tell me to fuck off. So the first thing you need to do there is not give a protocol, is to remove the annoying motherfucker Simon from poking George in the shoulder. So the first step is removing the things that are causing the issue. Let yourself calm down, going, finally, God, I've got a break. I've got a bit of peace and quiet. And then we start to go, well, how do we repair the gut? So if, put a one in the chat if you've heard about Michaela Peterson and Jordan Peterson's carnivore diet. Can't just be me. There's a bunch of lads on this call. A few of you must know who Jordan Peterson is.
Yeah, I watched him in Belfast. He's very good.
I like Jordan Peterson, but he's very big proponent of the carnivore diet, and people slam him and his daughter for using it, saying, your diet's unhealthy. I'm like, Michaela had 2 hip replacements before she was 17. Crazy depression, crazy acne, crazy inflammation. It's now gone. It is not a worse diet for her, right? But what they've done is they've just basically removed the irritants that have caused them the issues. Now, what they're not doing, which may or may not be a benefit to them, it's probably not worth the risk of having the symptoms come back because they were so severe, is looking at repair the gut in the background so you could start to reintroduce those foods with less problems, right? So when we look at what is the most common food intolerances, if you don't know and people have got severe issues, these are probably a good place to start, right? So these foods here, people often issues with dairy, people issues with gluten, which is on here yet. And these foods are probably the most common thing. So if you don't know where to start, I'd remove some of these. Now, there's a caveat to this. I probably would keep eggs and fish in for reasons that I'm going to speak about a little bit later on. But if you take all them out and keep eggs and fish in, and then they're still having symptoms, then maybe look at eggs and then maybe look at fish. I just think the benefits of eggs and fish for the gut outweigh the risk, unless you know for certain that is the issue. We're also going to look at foods that are high in FODMAPs. So high FODMAP foods are going to be certain vegetables that people tend to disagree with from a digestive perspective. Now, this is not everyone, and a lot of people are fine. But if you're finding out there's something in the vegetables that are causing issues, we can start to maybe look at these as probably going to be your biggest contributing factors. Now, that's a lot of food. I'm not saying get rid of them all unless someone has a real severe issue, but maybe going for a lower FODMAP diet could alleviate these symptoms for a period of time whilst we get to repairing it. Does anyone, if anyone wants me to take, if anyone wants to take a picture of this, let me know before I move on. Give me a thumbs up if you're all good for me to go to the next slide. Cool, I've got a few nods. Sweet. Feel free to ask me to go back up if you need to. Now, there is some ones on here. What you'll notice is there are some of these that are particularly good for the digestive system, in particular artichoke. So when we get to artichoke down the line, again, you go, oh, Simon, that was in the FODMAP list. So why are you saying it's a good thing? Artichoke has a massive benefits for the gut for a couple of reasons. But if it's causing irritation because of the FODMAPs in them, then it's not worth the benefits. It just goes. There's no food that's good. Like you don't have to squat, bench, or deadlift, right? But it doesn't mean they're not useful exercises. And also people are susceptible to certain things, like, for sake of argument, pesticides and things like this. Then you might look at things like the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen are foods that are more heavily sprayed with pesticides that you're probably more beneficial buying organic. Spend that little bit of extra money to get organic. The Clean 15 are the ones you could probably buy cheap. So again, this is just unpiecing those layers. Common inflammatories, FODMAPs, and then the next layer, maybe it's something they've sprayed on the food. We can start looking at maybe switching to organic of these foods. And this is updated. If you type in Dirty Dozen and Clean 15, they update this list every year based on changes in farming. So this might not be the most updated list, but it'll give you an idea where to start. The next one is seed oils. It's a hot topic, right? Paul Saladino says they're terrible and they're going to kill you. Lane Norton says there's no problems with them. So what do you guys think? Put in the chat. Pro or against? Put pro or anti seed oils. Kane says it depends. Devil's in the dose. Oh, Gavin, you're way ahead of the curve here, man. I'm impressed. Devil's in the dose being the key word. Both of these people are right. But the problem is, like, seed oils on paper, if we tested metabolically healthy people and if they had seed oils in their diet, does it cause negative side effects in randomized controlled trials? No. But the issue is since 1909, because they're now hidden in everything, we've seen this massive increase in seed oils, which does two things. One, ramps up calories, some a lot of hidden calories. Our food's more calorie dense than ever. But also, these are higher in our omega-6 fatty acids. I think it's on the next slide. When we look at the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, this is what it is in the West. I've shown this slide before. So if you've got somebody who's super inflamed, super unhealthy, eats a bunch of processed food, they could probably benefit from having less seed oils. It doesn't mean have none, but it means they could probably benefit from having less of this and more of this. But if you've got a metabolically healthy person who's already 12 to 15% body fat and has really like fat that's pliable and moves, who cares? The devil is in the dose. And like, before people get tribal with this, you wouldn't mock someone with a nut allergy. I've seen people mock people for like going, oh, your diet's rubbish. Why are you going on a low carb or a carnivore diet because of this? You have no issues with seed oils. You're an idiot. I'm like, I wouldn't say to someone who has like, hey, what do you mean you die when you eat peanuts? They're healthy. Get them in. Then why would you judge somebody who has an intolerance or digestive upset when eating certain pesticides or oils or things like this? Because when we look at science, we've got to understand science lives here. There's this bell curve of this is the randomized human control trials, or shall I do it like Lane Norton? The randomized human control trials shows what the majority of people respond to. But the problem with that is your clients, most of them will probably live in this middle. But you will get people here, and you will get people here. And if you blindly follow the evidence-based rhetoric, you might not be helping this person. Right? So the danger in the dose and understanding this stuff is important. And you can be intolerant to anything. I've had people that's intolerant to chicken, I've had people that's intolerant to beef, right? So regardless of how good something is, if it's not working with the digestive system, remove it. And a lot of people, you'll see a lot of people now with people going on podcasts talking about gut health saying, is red meat bad for the gut? Now, it's harder to digest. And if someone has bad digestion for other reasons, stress, inflammation, they might struggle digesting red meat, which could cause symptoms like GERD and gas and things like this. But is red meat the problem? Or they stop producing the enzymes like protease to help break down that red meat? That's a hard thing to say. But what I will say about this is that red meat and processed meat are not the same. When you see anti-red meat propaganda, normally on Netflix, they lump the term red and processed meat together like they're exactly the same. And when we look at a grass-fed steak full of selenium, zinc, B6 and B12, creatine, iron, niacin, tryptophan, phosphorus, and we look at a can of Spam or corned beef, this isn't the same food, right? People are more deficient in nutrients than ever. Adding in some red meat can be of beneficial nature. But if someone's got really bad digestive issues, they might not be able to break down a steak. So maybe going to easier digestible foods like mincemeat, which is already partially broken down for you, or fish might be easier to give that digestive system a rest. But it doesn't mean you get rid of red meat forever. It means that once the digestive system is better, maybe you'll move on to more solid cuts of meat. Does that make sense? Give me a few nods if that makes sense. So the easy way to do this, rather than taking every food out that has joy in their life, if someone's got these issues, do an easy elimination diet. I call this the straight swap elimination diet. I think I learned it from Luke, but I'm not entirely sure. But I learned it from somebody. But like, say, if they write down all the foods on the current diet on the left-hand side and make a straight swap. So they always have chicken every day, switch to turkey. If they have beef, switch to lamb. If they have broccoli, switch to spinach. Like, rotate their food sources. Because if we overeat something for a long period of time, that's why bodybuilders we often become intolerant to things like chicken. We've overproduced the enzymes, the body just kind of gets tired and doesn't produce them as well. If we never have a food, the body won't ramp up the enzymes to break this down. So this is why food rotation can be really important for digestion, but not so much that the diet becomes super complicated that you have to have a different meal plan every day. Start to see some issues, rotate some food sources. Next one is replace. So when it comes to replace, the aim now is to replace that things will either help the gut work well or give it back what it was lacking. We've now taken away the petrol. We've now taken away Simon prodding George in the shoulder. So now we can start to think, what is actually going to calm George down? I'm making it out like George is super stressed. I've never known him be stressed, but example purposes. You can never grow a beard that good whilst being stressed. It just wouldn't work. So look at where in the digestive tract the issue is for clues of where to start. So are they getting things like GERD, right? And heartburn, indigestion? Or are they getting things further down the digestive system like bloating, gas, and things like this? That might give you an idea of where to start with this. So a few examples could be hydration electrolytes. We're made of 7% water. This helps push food through the digestive system. We can look at nutrient deficiencies causing stress on the body. We can look at bringing inflammation down by ramping up omega-3s. We could supplement with things like pancreatic enzymes, which I have here because it just arrived today, right? We can look at things like betaine HCl. A lot of times people have heartburn and GERD. They think that they don't have enough stomach. They have too much stomach acid, when actually most of the time they have too little stomach acid. This is not always the case, but quite commonly. So the food's not being digested well in the stomach, and it's damaging the lower esophageal sphincter, causing acid to splash back up into the esophagus. So adding in a product like betaine HCl or even apple cider vinegar, if you want to do it on the cheap, can help break down this food. And this is a good place to add this in. We mentioned artichoke earlier on. So silmarian can help bile production, which can also help break down fats. Right? If any of you have had a client if you ever put a 1 in the chat, if you had a client that says that anytime I don't deal well with carbs, anytime I have carbs, I get bloated. And they blame carbs as the issue. Because I've certainly had that. So quite often a lot, it's not the carb. You know, Mark, I've seen enough of your content that I know that you know that carbs aren't bad. It's probably they're just not in a position to digest those carbs well. They could be in a chronically stressed state. They're not sleeping well, not recovering well. So starting to look at work in the gut here could help someone eventually introduce carbs. Maybe start lower carb because we don't want to make, like, if they feel carbs are bad, you don't want to go, no, you must have them because science says. But take them out, look at repairing some of the gut, look at this stuff, then start to reintroduce them later. So when we look at nutrient deficiencies, like, people talk about supplements not being important, and people talk about fitting any food you want to your macros. Like, this is the US population, appreciate it, not the UK, but look at the amount of nutrient deficiencies that people have. If we can plug this gap, things will work so much better. And then when we look at some of the things that foods that we can have the most nutrient density, this is where, like, the carnivore diet isn't entirely wrong, because look at beef liver at the top as the most nutrient dense food you can find. So look at some of these foods and pad out your diets with things that are going to ramp up as much nutrition as humanly possible. I'm not saying go full carnivore, because there's also leafy greens up at the top here, right? But again, if you've got a client that doesn't like vegetables, rather than tell him to force feed them veg going, no, because it's good for you. Well, do you like liver? Yeah, well, let's have some of that. And then over time, we can maybe start to try and encourage them as their taste change to eat more veg. So now we've kind of taken the stuff out, we've removed it. We've now looked at replacing some of the things to get the digestive system working well again. We're now looking at repairing. If the issue is leaky gut, let's repair some of the gut lining. So things like aloe and MCT oil can help soothe the symptoms of the gut. These two sections kind of blend into each other. Certain teas like peppermint and chamomile can also ease digestive distress. So once you remove foods, it helps you to calm down and get that kind of bit of a break. Glutamine in particular, glutamine is an amino acid that has a direct response of improving gut lining and repairing the gut lining. So that could be a really good thing, like 5 to 10 grams of glutamine, depending on how severe these issues are, could do a world of good. Now, unless there's a severe autoimmune issue where someone's not digesting fiber well, the psyllium husk can also help repair the gut. We've spoken about before, oily fish and an omega-3 supplement can also help with this inflammation balance. Now, if someone is a vegan, you can use flaxseed, you can supplement with a krill oil. Consuming inulin-rich foods, again, like artichoke, can help fuel good bacteria. So these are some of the things you can play around with to help in this stage. And now you've got through this. Now you've taken the food out that's disagreeing with them. You've allowed the digestive system to calm down. You've added some things to repair the gut for 4 to 6 weeks, and they've had a good about 4 or 6 weeks of no symptoms. It's now time to start repopulating. And this is now working on our good versus bad bacteria. So, looking at this, another randomized control trial, probiotics have been shown to reduce leaky gut, reduce inflammation, and obviously increase good bacteria. Now, in this particular study, the strains that we used were lactobacillus and soil-based, not soiled, soil-based probiotics and bifidobacterium. If people want to nerd out on probiotic strains, they can. It's really interesting. It's really nerdy. It can help with specific symptoms. It's another lecture on its own. But if people want to know, that's the ones that were looked at here. So to achieve a healthy gut, we need a wide variety of bacteria without any getting overpopulated. So things like Candida and H. pylori, which we've been shown as like the nasty shit that can fuck us up a bit, a little bit of it's fine. Overgrowth, bad, right? Gut dysbiosis, if we have too much bad bacteria to good bacteria, can lead to lower dopamine levels, like we spoke before, impacting motivation and willpower. It can also have an impact on leptin, ghrelin, and NPY, causing hunger dysregulation. It can impact the hippocampus through the vagus nerve that we spoke about earlier, which impacts short-term memory. This is why brain fog is often a digestive thing. It can decrease zinc absorption, which has an impact on the immune system. So people with digestive issues can get ill more often. It can also lower testosterone. It can increase inflammation and oxidative stress, which impacts our cells, that we spoke about before. So some of the things we can do here. And yes, I appreciate that I put a picture of Tim Spector. No, I don't like him either. But he's not all wrong. So adding in some pre and in particular some good probiotics in could be of benefit in this stage to start repopulating the gut bacteria. Like now you've got it healthy. Like if you put probiotics in when the gut is still being attacked, it won't do that much because it's just going to start damaging everything. The bad is going to overcome the good. But if now we've kind of got this point where we've calmed things down, this is a good time to start adding in a probiotic. We can add in some fermented foods to add in some probiotics in, like kefir or cottage cheese or yogurts or things like this. And the thing that Tim Spector says that is particularly good is aiming for 30 different plants per week. And again, unless a client has issues with pesticides or fiber, where you might go for a more keto carnivore style approach, but that's really severe cases where you may even be looking to refer out at that point. But if assuming someone's healthy and can deal with these stuff, adding in a lot of plant foods can be beneficial. Now, understanding 30 different plants per week sounds mad, but when you start realizing that plants are not just veg, it could be fruit, it could be veg, it could be nuts, it could be seeds, even chocolate, right? It doesn't mean people can start eating Galaxy bars and heal their guts, but like having a good variety of foods is what's going to populate this. Experiment with new foods that they can digest well. And if you can rotate food sources every now and again, that's just going to help keep this population of good and bad bacteria as dispersed as possible. So no one bacteria is overgrowing. And 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day, again, if someone can handle it well, is probably going to cover your bases here. So if people want dosages, right, on current research, you're probably looking at around about 1 to 10 billion for around about 2 to 3 month period of lacto and bifido. Soil-based proteins, if you're going to use them, I don't tend to, but you're looking at a little bit less. These are like lactobacillus is the one that's normally sold in most supplements. So somewhere of a dosage around about the 10 billion mark if people have symptoms is probably a good place to start. And then lastly, rebalance / reintroduce. So now we've got a position where gut's calmed down, repaired the gut lining, we've sealed that door, we've given that bouncer a pay rise. So he's now shutting the door. He's not letting anything in. So the antibodies are doing their job. We're now in a system where if we add foods back in, we're in a better place to digest them well. So it's now worth trying these things again because not everyone wants to get rid of the foods that caused issues forever. If I told you, like, Gavin, what's your favorite food in the world?
Well, I'm from Ireland, so probably spuds.
Spuds. Okay, so if I taught you to take, like, you found out potatoes were causing digestive irritants and it was causing you real issues, you might be happy to remove them for 4 to 6 months to solve that problem. But you probably wouldn't want to get rid of them for the rest of your life. So if we want adherence to this thing, we need to start looking at what's our plan, what's our exit strategy to get back to eating somewhat normally. So begin to reintroduce foods one at a time, monitor symptoms. If it responds well, add it back in. If not, remove it again, right? The other thing that's important here is that a lot of people do the gut protocol and then they're done. See you later. Well, we can't get back to the lifestyle that got the gut unhealthy in the first place. So this is where it's still important to install the non-negotiables around meal timings. So chewing your food, not eating stressed, like minimally processed foods where possible, right? Stress management, sleep, These are the stuff that's just sort of like the insurance buffer to keep all of your hard work in place. Rotate foods every now and again to ensure you're not over or under producing enzymes. And then cycle calories so we can monitor our hormone health. We mentioned thyroid being really important here, right? But if we're chronically in a dieting phase all year, thyroid's going to start to go down. So have periods of time in a deficit, have periods of time in a surplus, have periods of time at maintenance, and plan this into your timelines. Like if there's one health hack for longevity, it's cycling calories. So a recap to finish off. Take a food reaction log, see trends. Remove troublesome foods for 4 to 6 weeks and work on in that time bringing down stress and inflammation. Then in that time, maybe we look at the easy straight stop elimination diet. In that 4 to 6 weeks, we now start to look at repairing the gut lining. We then repopulate with good bacteria. And we then start to slowly reintroduce foods. If someone has severe gut issues, it is hard because every time someone breaks the clock, we start at 0. If you know that gluten affects you and you go and have a Subway sandwich, we're back to day 0. It sucks. But again, this is that thing of what are people willing to give up? And knowing this will affect their health. So, simple advice. Slow down. Chew your food properly. Get your clients to put the fork down between bites. Stay hydrated to help the digestive system move food through it and to help cells be healthy. Never eat rushed. Never eat stressed. Manage stress overall. Identify food tolerances and triggers. Manage your fiber intake to heal the gut lining. Smart supplementation, in particular things like omega-3s. We might even look at things like magnesium to help calm the central nervous system. And here's the point I was meant to put a slide in, but I didn't, is that caffeine. Some people say caffeine's bad for you. Some people say caffeine's good for you. Like seed oils, they increase in the dose. But also, if someone's got a massive issue with gut and digestion and they're chronically stressed, having something that's a stimulant that ramps up more stress is probably not good for a period of time. So if you can minimize caffeine during that 4 to 6 weeks while you're trying to manage the gut health, again, people might not be willing to do that. I probably wouldn't because I fucking love coffee, but it's something to consider. Rotate food every now and again. Keep active because that increases blood flow around everything, including the digestive system. And then cycle calories. And that is us. Has that been useful, guys? Put a 1 in the chat if you've taken a few things away from that. That's 60 slides in an hour and 5 minutes. I'm pretty impressed with myself. I'll start with, if Sam's still there. Sam, one thing you've taken away from today that'll be useful with your clients or that you didn't know before.
I'd probably say about the the fiber, mate. So obviously I know, it's one for digestion, stuff like that, but a lot of the time I think it's, often mislooked at. People will sort of like, if they're saying about carbs bloating them and stuff like that, they just totally neglect fiber. So a small, simple thing. And also the glutamine, because I've had a lot of people where I will just give advice to looking at the fiber and, making sure the meal times are spot on and stuff. But if it's an additive as to where, it's still not doing the job, obviously glutamine can come into factor there as well. So yeah,
a couple of things on that with regards to fiber. We can go down another wormhole, which I go into on the lectures in the portal, of different types of fiber, soluble and insoluble fiber, right? So it could just be as simple as that, right? Someone's having things that congest too much stool, creating constipation, or too much loose stool. That could be an easy fix. Another thing to bear in mind in regards to glutamine also has an impact of intramuscular water retention. So if you give someone glutamine, they look a little bit more jacked as well. That's just a nice positive side effect. Gavin?
Yes, sir. Probably the 5, what was it? The 5?
5 R's.
5 R's, yeah. That's one thing I've never heard of. So be something that I probably will delve into a wee bit more. Now I know you did, but as you said, it was over an hour. So I like to think like I can't take things in as much as everyone else can. I would literally need to spend another hour and a half, 2 hours sitting down and actually taking that all in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's the same with everybody, right? Like, it's like I always look at this as like my job is to facilitate learning rather than to teach. So if I can give you a couple of little nuggets that you can go away, the key then is going and applying it. So if you kind of go right, let's look into this 5R program and let's write a protocol. If you write a template protocol for somebody and then you start using it with people, then you go, oh, okay. And some other stuff I said today, you might go, I've not found that work. You sack it off and say, Simon's a fucking idiot. And then other things you might go, that really worked. Simon's a genius. And you learn by doing.
Yeah, well, I understand the thyroid thing because I only got my bloods done in January and my thyroid came back underactive, but I think that was down to the photo shoot prep.
Yeah. Because if you think thyroid is like a thermostat, right? So like if we bring calories down, thyroid will follow it. So if you were in a chronic deficit for a long period of time, it might not be anything to worry about right now. If you've only recently finished dieting, give yourself 3 to 6 months, take it again, and actually spend time in a maintenance to a surplus.
Yeah, yeah.
Thyroid might come back where it needs to be. If it doesn't, then feel free to drop me a message and we can have a look at why that could be.
Well, it hasn't. So
okay, well, I'll drop you a message after this. We can have a look at that.
That was actually, we actually looked at thyroid medication for 12 weeks and it's still come back under. So
what medication was it? Was thyroxine?
T3 and T4, and then we come away from the T3.
Yeah, you can, because T3 will shut down your own supply. That's the worrying one. T4 won't. But then if it's a conversion issue, then T4 doesn't fucking do anything.
Yeah, so then the T4, it stayed in. We got bloods done again and it's still come back.
I would start looking at the gut in that sense.
Yeah.
Might be a good place to start. James?
Sorry, mate. So like Gavin, the 5 hours, really, really, really good. I've got someone who's interested in working with me. She's really struggling with all this. Is why I voted for Gut Health. She's got a bit of IBS, has a super processed food and all that sort of stuff. And she's doing everything, like, which is probably in, I think it's in the rebalance section around getting the probiotics. Trying all these little things about putting out the fire to start with. And that's like a big main key factor. You know, even I give her some little bits of thing, and it was all like straight down to all probiotics and all that sort of stuff. Because that's kind of mentality in your head without really going into the whole remove, replace.
It's because it's the hardest thing. Everyone likes the idea of a probiotic solving the issue. Like if someone told me that, like this stuff, right? I mean, that people will talk about the artificial sweeteners in here, and they're not as dangerous as people think. And I have my own personal biases that I don't want to buy into any research that says this is bad. So I will believe Mr. Lane Norton because I love them, right? But they're not great for your gut microbiome. And if I realized this was causing me issues, I would much rather take a probiotic than remove Coke Zeros because it's one of my favorite things in the world. Same as coffee. That's why people go to the sexy stuff and ignore this, because no one wants to remove cake or gluten or dairy. But depends if the pain gets bad enough. Is the why worth it?
She's really bad with it, mate. Really bad, really bloated. You know, even she sent me pictures of it, bloating. It's like horrific. And all the symptoms she talks about, it's a mixture of everything. She'll eat something fatty, like I say, a burger or something like that, and then she'll be really bad after doing that. So she's got an awareness of it, and I've got quite a good awareness of it when I start working with her. But I will simply go, you know, straight into that 5 hours and
take her off it for a while. Give her a break.
Get into, you know, I wouldn't even, you know, and I know she's again yo-yo dieting, but not yo-yo dieting in a stupid fashion with like Weight Watchers or anything like that. She just like calorie counts herself and puts stuff down, and she's yo-yoing all over the kind of place. So I would like.
Yeah, fun fact about that, by the way, when you're looking at the popular diet trends that had, they looked at total weight loss and biggest long-term sort of adherence to the diet. The Zone diet lost the most weight because it's a lowish carb diet, so it would. And then Weight Watchers actually was one of the better ones in terms of long-term adherence to the diet. And I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's community-based. It's calorie counting without calorie counting. It's much better than Herbalife and Slimming World, you know. So, George.
Not gonna lie, mate. I need to watch the whole thing back.
Well, is there anything that went in as like a one kind of like, oh shit?
Not really. My head was fried. I was on the phone to someone from Future Fit about doing my SNC and my muscle squad, and then she started throwing me all numbers and shit, and I was like,
"You're already in a place where your head was fried coming back into the call." Yeah,
and I was like, I'm just gonna sit here and try and listen. But yeah, my brain's just gone.
I will send you the link directly, so you've got it.
Cheers, dude.
Right, guys, I will stop the recording.